the hard knock life, but not the chicka kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives.
Welcome back to the Hard Knock Life with the Nerds of Color. I am your host, Keith Chow. It's been a while since we've had one of these shows, and thank you for being patient with us and sticking around. But we have an awesome show lined up, and we get to talk about some of my favorite things with one of my favorite people on the internet. It's going to be like the State of the Union, but for Asian America and Asian American pop culture. So I figured who better than one of the best pop culture writers about Asian American pop culture on the internet. Please welcome for the first time to Hard Knock Life, Susan Cheng from BuzzFeed. What's up, Susan?
Hi, Keith. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Hard Knock Life. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a long time, so I'm glad we were able to make it work. We share a passion for Asian American representation in pop culture. I know that you write a lot about it in BuzzFeed, and of course I write about it on the Nerds of Color. And 2016 and going now into 2017 has been kind of a weird time to be Asian American and entertainment. How would you sum up like the state of Asian American popular culture right now?
Right now, well, I can sum up like 2016 was really, it was kind of a mess. And, it was a mess, but then there was this turning point where you really saw Asian Americans come together and talk about, what's happening in Hollywood and, these films these stories that we love that are getting whitewashed and this Asian erasure that was happening. I saw a lot of solidarity, and it was very inspiring. It was interesting that it happened after such a good year.
2015, yeah.
Fresh Off the Boat, Dr. Ken, Master of None. And so now I think I'll be interested to see what happens now, because we just had Great Wall come out, which was for representation, and it was...
Yeah, it was not good.
So I don't know it's kind of the beginning of the year. I don't know where we go from here, because we had last year was kind of like we all we're fired up, and now it'll be interesting to see what projects do come out.
I'm kind of glad you brought up the Great Wall as kind of like a first kind of talking point for today, because the Hollywood Reporter I think just came out with a story either today or yesterday about how they lost like $80 million making that movie. It was supposed to be this, first foray into real cross, China, Hollywood, co-production where, we're going to tap into the two largest markets in the world and we're going to make $1 gazillion. And, what they ended up doing is making a movie that pleased nobody, whether you were Chinese or American. And particularly if you were like Chinese American, you really hated that movie. And, it's kind of what, one of the things though is what's funny, and this is kind of goes back to an op-ed I wrote for the New York Times last year, is this idea that someone like a Matt Damon, who's the whole reason that you cast him to lead a movie like The Great Wall, is because he's this like bankable movie star. Like you can go no wrong with a Matt Damon, and yet here we have a movie that loses all this money. Do you think will he ever work again?
He'll work again. Come on, Keith. He's right. He's gonna get more gigs. But I read that Hollywood Reporter story, and I'm interested in how this movie will impact future collaborations with China. Because for a long time, people were talking about how China is affecting our movies, and I mean, this movie seemed representative of this what is to come, and if it is representative of what's to come, then I'm really depressed. And I was always interested in how China would affect, how China's censorship and tendency to create propaganda films would affect our movies. But seeing as this movie didn't do well, is this another turning point?
That's a good point, because one of the things that I always found interesting, as because this is the state of Asian America, is this idea that movies that would appeal to China would automatically appeal to Asian Americans, and that you would hire Chinese stars to kind of like if we're moving towards a more diverse Hollywood that you would cast, because this happens if a lot of they'll bring in like K-pop stars, right? Like they try to make Rain a thing for a while, and say that appeals to the Asian American market. But there's something very specific about being Asian American and being catered to, because you mentioned 2015 was a banner year because we had things like Fresh Off the Boat that starred Asian Americans talking about Asian American issues, Aziz Ansari, Ken Jeong. So like, how do we convince Hollywood that just throwing like Chinese people in a movie, like Chinese people from China, like, Li Bingbing can't be in every movie, right? How do we convince them that that is not an appeal to the Asian American market? Or do they even give a shit about the Asian American market, honestly?
Does Hollywood give a shit about the Asian American market?
Probably not, I'm thinking.
They really just cared about how Chinese audiences would receive it. But they're starting to catch on. I mean, I think they're starting to notice that it's pandering.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a word for it. They call these stars who are embedded into our movies flower vases. So there for appearance, nothing substantial. There's no, it adds nothing. And so they're starting to catch on. And right, I think that Asian American as a term had really entered the mainstream until I don't think Hollywood has never explored the Asian American identity. We got a little bit of that in the Joy Luck Club, but that was in 1993. And we're starting to see that now. But I mean, I think that really, I remember when White Washed Out happened, and it's the first time that people really paid attention to us. Just a group of us coming together and talking about what it was like growing up Asian American and how that's distinct from why their stories don't speak to us. So weirdly, even though like people have been fighting for Asian American representation for decades, weirdly, I feel like it's only that term, that identity has only entered the mainstream. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the, kind of the conflation of Asian American and Asian, right? Like we are one of the stereotypes that we have to deal with is this like perpetual foreigner status, right? Like, it's just like this idea that if you're Asian, you must be an immigrant. Like I want to hear an Asian American story that doesn't involve immigrants. You know what I mean? Like, so like, I think that the idea that there even is an Asian American market is something that, Hollywood is kind of oblivious to. And, this kind of like surfaces in a show that's going to debut in a couple weeks. Something that like put us on the map as the Nerds of Color, I think, was Iron Fist. And I don't know how much you've been following like the drips and drabs of all of the promotion that's that Marvel's been putting out, but Netflix is about to debut their Iron Fist show, which could have been, and I've always argued, could have been their kind of foray into like Asian American stories, just like Luke Cage was like a black story, Jessica Jones was a woman empowerment story. And now we have Iron Fist, which is going to be, oh, here's a white dude who's really good at kung fu story, as if that's a story we haven't heard a million times.
Yeah, it could have been so different. It could have been great to have an Asian Iron Fist. But again, I don't think that people really understood the difference. You're right. Like we're constantly being portrayed as the other. Marvel knows what's up now. Like I really think that, all of us and talking about why it's fucked up, I think they at least get it, because today I saw a billboard for Iron Fist, but instead of Finn Jones being on display, it was Jessica Henwick.
Yeah. And I saw the same. I think it was a tweet by Aaron Madison from MTV, and he said, I think the caption on his tweet was like, "Wait, Marvel thinks they slick," and it's like wait a minute, if you're, because it doesn't even say like Colleen Wing on the billboard, right? It just says Iron Fist, and you see Jessica, and you're like, oh wow, that looks pretty dope. But yeah, it's. I think they're trying to pull a fast one on us, but we know the deal.
What have you seen any of Iron Fist yet?
I've only seen the footage that they've released. So like the trailers, of course, the Comic-Con trailer that came out in the fall. I think they released a longer trailer recently. Like, I mean, I get the sense that it's like, feel bad for the guy who appropriated our culture because no one understands him. He just really loves Chinese culture.
Yeah.
He can't help it.
Can't help it. Or, I mean, they try to spin. Didn't they try to, like, he's this guy who goes there and he doesn't fit in there. So we kind of capture that, like, idea that he doesn't belong.
Right.
Which I don't know if I buy that.
Well, and this goes back to like the whole argument about an Asian American Iron Fist. Like what you describe is the Asian American experience, right? Like if you are an Asian American in Asia, you are an outsider. You don't fit in, right? Like navigating the space between being Asian and being an American is like our whole experience.
It's like, doesn't matter where I go. If I go to visit relatives in Hong Kong, walking down the street in Los Angeles, which is very diverse, I still stick out. I still, don't quite fit in either places. And so, yeah, Asian diaspora, man.
Well, and it kind of reminds me of something, I think, I forget which publication, maybe it was Entertainment Weekly, but recently Finn Jones was quoted in an article saying that one of the ways that they've trying to, that the show is not whitewashed is because they've made Kunlun very diverse. And that just made me kind of like step back and go, whoa, hold on, what? So now the mystical Asian space is not even Asian? Like they've made Kunlun diverse? Is that actually reflected in the show? And if so, WTF?
That reminds me of Doctor Strange, where in Doctor Strange, we go to this ancient, mystical, pseudo-Asian land. Not Tibet.
Right.
We don't know where it is. But yeah, it was just a bunch of people practicing magic. It was like people from like of all colors and all creeds practicing magic and kung fu. And
magic that looks a lot like Tai Chi for some reason, but yeah.
But we're not going to call it that because because it's not Asian people. It's not all Asian people doing Tai
Celtic
Chi.
people.
It seems like Marvel is, make these tweaks that don't quite work. Do you want to talk about Doctor?
Let's talk about Doctor Strange because, that's another film, though it came out last year, it just was released on Blu-ray. It's been on like digital streaming for a week or so now. So it's kind of back in the news, right? Like it's the one thing about, where what you mentioned, whitewashed out, where that whole thing came from was like, early last year, it was just like hit after hit after hit. If you were an Asian American who consumes, like media, you had, the debut of what Tilda Swinton looked like as the Ancient One. You had, Scarlett Johannson, Ghost in the Shell, which we'll talk about soon. You had all of these things kind of like culminate, and it's like I feel like March, this, now that we're in March 2017, it's another wave hitting us because we have, Doctor Strange coming out on Blu-ray. We have Iron Fist about to debut. Ghost in the Shell is about. So it's like, it's like another wave of like, oh, by the way, Hollywood hates you, Asian people, right? Like you forget for a while. You hear a couple of good news, and then boom, oh, that's right, they hate us. So now that we can relive Doctor Strange on Blu-ray, what was your opinion of how they handled, the idea that the Ancient One, which was, arguably a stereotype, not even arguably, definitely, a negative stereotypical character from the comics. What did you think of this idea? Like, well, the best way to erase the stereotype is to erase the Asianness from the stereotype.
So then it's not a stereotype, but perhaps more egregious. Doctor Strange, I will say, at least I liked what they did with the character Wong.
Right.
And he was funny,
He listened to Beyonce,
Yeah, he listened. So, he was like the stereotype there.
But, it's kind of the idea, right? Like one of the things, that came out when the movie came, one of the stories that came out is that they almost didn't even have the character, right? It was like Wong is, again, such a stereotypical character in the comics that the director's initial like reaction was like, oh, let's just not even put him in it because we don't want to, we don't even touch that landmine of like the subservient, Asian, manservant. And you're right, they gave him they made him not a servant. They made him, have some like
they made him assertive.
Yeah, have some of the better lines in the film. But at the same time, it's like this instinct, right? That like the only way to deal with stereotypes is to just completely erase like the ethnicity, as if that was the problem. I've written about this a lot on the Nerds of Color, this idea that like, oh, we don't want an Asian martial artist because, bad stereotype. But it's like, no, the bad part is not that the martial artist is Asian. It's that the Asian martial artist doesn't get shit to do. That's the problem. Give him stuff to do, make him like a complex character, and then the stereotype is broken.
Yeah, like with martial artists, there's never any nuance, and they're not given like a backstory. We don't know anything about them. I don't know if you saw the recent Bruce Lee movie that came out.
The one starring a white guy?
It was, yeah. What was up with that? Right, you need that white guy. But no, that movie, I saw it. Really, really cool fight scenes. But I really wanted more about Bruce Lee. I didn't want this fictional narrative. I wanted, just like a more like nuance, like tell us who Bruce Lee was, like why is he the legend that he is, didn't get that.
Yeah, well, and I think what's kind of funny is that there is a show that's coming back this month that is about an Asian American martial artist, where he is a conflicted character, and he's the lead, and he has levels to his personality, and it's a show called Into the Badlands. That's on AMC. And I think in the trolliest troll move in the history of trolling, AMC is debuting the second season of Into the Badlands the same weekend Iron Fist comes out. So I think that is the best thing ever. But it stars Daniel Wu, who's even though he was born in the Bay, he's came to stardom in Hong Kong because there are no roles for Asian people in America, so you have to go to Hong Kong to become a star. And It was a moderate hit, I think, for AMC last year. It's coming back. It debuts March 19th on AMC, the second season. And that's an example of like, the showrunners were like, oh, we're going to do this martial arts show, but we have to cast like an Asian American guy. Like we can't take ourselves seriously. And then Al Gough and Miles Millar, who were the showrunners, have been quoted saying this, like we set out to find like a real martial artist and a real, showcase, and an Asian American, and his like little sidekick is also an Asian American actor. So like,
right?
Yeah, the guy who plays MK, his name is Aramis Knight. He's so like the idea that casting to deliberately find people of color shouldn't be that difficult, right? And I think that what happens so often in Hollywood is that they don't even think to look for people of color, and that's the first level of problems, isn't it?
Yeah, the problem is there are no roles written specific. There are very few roles written specifically for Asian Americans and people of color. And I actually just interviewed John M. Chu for a story about his casting process for Crazy Rich Asians. With that movie, it was based off Kevin Kwan's book characters, so you literally there are all the roles there. And so I was talking to him about this video of like in late January asking for submissions from the public, from Asian American actors, to audition via YouTube, via social media. And I was just kind of curious, because I usually don't see directors do that. And I wanted to know why he went the extra mile of opening up to the public, because that's a lot of work, And so when I talked to him, he attacked that myth that there are no Asian American entertainers. There are actually so many. Right. There are Asian entertainers, from Asia. They're, your K-pop stars, Taiwanese stars, actors from Hong Kong and whatnot. And then even just in the U.S., Asian American actors, there are so many. But it's just like these aspiring stars don't have roles to go out for. They don't have representation. Right. And so it's just like the cyclical cycle, it makes sense why Asian Americans don't have representation, or a manager or an agent. Why would you if there is like one of 50 roles for specifically written for Asians, you know?
Right.
And so I think that Crazy Rich Asians will hopefully kind of be this wake-up call to Hollywood and be like, hey, look, you've got all this talent out there, writers and stories about Asian Americans or about these people who want to tell stories.
Yeah. Is it bad that, like, as an Asian American, I kind of feel like I'm putting all of my eggs in the Crazy Rich Asians basket at this point? It's like, you know, because when the movie, when it was announced, it was kind of like, oh crap, that's, you know, because it's such a popular book. I think there's a sequel came out, and then when they announced John Chu as the director, and he tweeted out like right away, like, I'm casting nothing but Asians. This happened at like the height of Whitewashed Out, right? That and then recently that they announced that the lead would be Constance Wu, who's playing the lead of the lead character, who is the Asian American student who goes with her boyfriend to meet his crazy rich Singaporean family. Like it almost feels like, could this be our, you know, we're just coming off of the Oscars. Could this be our like big Asian American Oscar movie? Like, I don't know. Maybe I wanted to win Oscars. I wanted to make $1 billion, and I wanted to launch like 1,000 stars. But is that too much to ask of John?
I mean, man, that is a lot of pressure. I asked him, I'm like, hey, you doing okay? You all right? And he was just like, hey, he was like, it's one movie. Like, it's just one movie. The hope is that there will be many, many more. I hope it makes a shit ton of money, because that is a color that Hollywood sees, green. Yeah. I hope that it does propel a bunch of Asian American stars into mainstream. We can only hope, right? Yeah,
I mean, it's what the comedian Jenny Yang famously called rep sweats, right? Like when Fresh Off the Boat came out, and it was like we put all of our like passion behind it. And even if you're an Asian American, you didn't even, you know, if you didn't like the show, you couldn't admit it, right? Because we can't let it down. And I feel the same way with Crazy Rich Asians. It's like, you know, the moment that they announced, especially when they announced Constance, because I feel like if there's ever been an opportunity to have, like, you know, there have been relatively, you know, popular Asian American actors over the years, right? Like John Cho is one. But I feel like something about Constance, you know, she could be our, like, she can be our queen.
Yeah.
I'm electing her queen of Asian America.
I think I see her play Rachel Chu, because Rachel Chu is kind of like this girl next door, American-born Chinese person. That's so different from her role on the show, Fresh Off the Boat. Immigrant mother, which is very, very different. And kind of like try to capture, you know, what it means. Try to capture that struggle we have as an Asian American. Because in the book, she goes to Singapore, where she doesn't fit in with these people who look like her. Right. But she's from New York. Right, but that's the thing. I think with a role like that, it goes back to what we were saying. This idea of like a different lens of the Asian American experience, because we tend to get, you know, the same stories over and over again that do get told from an Asian American perspective. And this one could be, you know, a major crossover hit, you know, not seen since like something like Joy Luck Club, because it's a popular book, right? It's you know, got some prestige in terms of like the like Nina Jacobson, who was like the driving force behind I think the Hunger Games movies. It's not like some small indie, right? Like this is a major Hollywood production with an all Asian cast and crew that, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's unfair to John, but you know, this is the rep sweats again, right? To coin a phrase that was bandied about when Fresh Off the Boat came out. It's like this is, and it's part of the problem is that there aren't enough opportunities that, like, when we do get the one, we cling to it like our life depends on it. Everything is riding on it. Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure, John. What do you think about for movies like this? What do you think about, you know, does it offend you if a Korean American gets cast in the role of a Chinese person? Like, what's your take on that?
I think I probably come from a different lens in a lot of people, and the answer might surprise you. I don't care, honestly, if the characters are Asian American, that other Asian Americans play like ethnically different Asian Americans, right? So, for example, since we're talking about Constance, the fact that Randall Park plays a Taiwanese American person doesn't offend me.
Yeah.
Because like and especially I think second season Randall Park, second season Louis Wong, he's like he dropped the accent like 10 episodes into the show, right? Like he doesn't even do the fake Taiwanese accent anymore.
Right.
So like he's playing an Asian American guy. So I feel less kind of like territorial about, you know, if the character is Asian American and you cast an Asian American, whether he's Korean, you know, Thai, Chinese, whatever, I don't have necessarily a problem. I think where it's tricky is if the character is ethnically that ethnicity. Right? That sounded silly. But like so for example with the Memoirs of a Geisha, like having all Chinese actresses playing Japanese characters like in full like, you know, Japanese regalia is weird.
Yeah.
You know? But I guess I draw the line in terms of like, are they playing, you know, Asian American? If they're playing Asian American characters, then as long as the actors, I have a bigger problem with like casting a foreign-born Asian star to play an Asian American person. It's a different experience, so it also perpetuates the foreigner thing, right? So I feel more territorial over, you know, roles for Asian American actors that are given to like non-American Asian actors. If that makes sense.
In a way, and I don't want to use this term loosely, but in a way it's like American story, specifically that is being told by someone who doesn't actually have that cultural understanding.
Right, exactly. So it's like I always use this you know, kind of analogy with like it's the difference between Jeremy Lin and Yao Ming, right? In the sense that like when Yao Ming was I probably loved Yao Ming more than I loved Jeremy Lin as a basketball player. But, you know, when Shaquille O'Neal makes fun of Yao Ming, when he like does a ching chong thing with Yao Ming, Yao's not going to take it the same way, right? Like Jeremy understands if someone does a ching chong thing, or if an ESPN headline says the chink in his armor, there's a sting that he feels that someone like Yao wouldn't necessarily feel, right? So like, there's a different understanding if you're an Asian American than if you're Asian from Asia. So, yeah. I like how I turned this around to like a basketball podcast. I apologize for that. No, but going back to Constance Wu for a second, though, I think one of the other reasons that I'm more than willing to like bow down to her as the Queen of Asian America is that I think she combines like, you know, of course she's talented and, you know, definitely due an Emmy one day for her role on Fresh Off the Boat. But she's also very outspoken too, right? Like she doesn't just kind of sit back and let, you know, Hollywood be Hollywood. Which happens a lot of times too with a lot of Asian American, like there are Asian Americans who get to a certain level of stardom that kind of like back off and are not as quick to criticize like Hollywood's racist casting practices. But Constance, you know, she's reached a certain level. I mean, she's the lead of a successful primetime broadcast sitcom, and she still will call Hollywood out on its bullshit. What do you think of like Constance as like?
It's gutsy.
You know,
it's very bold of her that we have her, because I can't really think of who is as vocal as her. You know, I mean, she called out Casey Affleck, which.
Nobody else did in that Kodak theater, right?
Yeah. She called out Matt Damon from day one. She put her foot down. And I think and I wonder if, you know, good for us. But I also think it's because there are more Asian Americans behind the scenes now. Can take what she's saying and take it to like big Hollywood execs and say like, look, this is what's happening. This is what's happening on Twitter. I don't know if you've been on Twitter, but everyone is pissed.
So like, I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on before we go, and we could probably talk about this like for the rest of the day. The other thing that's coming out in a couple weeks that was, you know, part of that whole whitewashed out kind of wave, and now we're seeing like it come to fruition is Ghost in the Shell, Scarlett Johannson starring in Ghost in the Shell. That's coming out in a couple weeks. Like I said, it just seemed like this is another culmination of so many of the things that remind us of why Hollywood hates us. That said, you know, Ghost in the Shell was always going to come out. It wasn't like they were going to cancel the movie. But do you think that, and, you know, given whether or not this movie makes money, have we reached like the end of this idea that white people have to be Asian in order for Asian stories to be told? Or do you think something like Whitewashed Out and all of the Twitter stuff has done something in Hollywood, has made a change that now, you know, Ghost in the Shell is actually the end of that kind of practice, and from now on we're going to get more Crazy Rich Asians and more Fresh Off the Boats? Or am I just being kind of, you know, too optimistic about that?
I think it has made a difference. You know, having our voices all come together really has made a difference. I don't know if I'm too close to the topic, like, you know, because I'm on Twitter. I participated in Whitewashed Out. I interviewed John M. Chu right after Whitewashed Out happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is there actually going to be change? I'm hopeful. I mean, it can't be fun dealing with outcry all the time. Like, I remember there was this Deadline article about this sitcom that was in development called Mail Order.
Yeah.
Based on someone's actual life, which, you know, fine, it's based on a real story, but that was promptly shut down. I'd never seen, you know, a network react that fast, because NBC immediately was like, I think within days, they announced that that was not going to happen, that they pulled it. So that was really, really reassuring. That was amazing.
So it's not naive to feel optimistic that we've kind of, maybe we've reached a nadir point, and now it's, you know, they're going to turn their eyes towards more Asian American talent, and we'll have more stories beyond just like the one sitcom here and the one movie there.
We just need to keep talking about it. We need to keep, you know, showing that we are angry. We gotta stay angry.
Stay angry. Hashtag stay angry.
Yeah.
Shout
out Phil you.
Get your t-shirts.
Yeah.
I would definitely, like, hopefully hope to have you back again, you know, in the near future, and we can talk about a bunch of other stuff. But, you know, like I said, we could talk about this for days probably, but I want to just thank you, Susan, for being a part of Hard Knock Life. Can you quickly just tell folks where they can find you online, and where we can read your latest interview with John Chu?
It's going to be on BuzzFeed Entertainment, and you can find me at @scheng_ on Twitter.
All right. Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us here on Hard Knock Life. Thank you guys out there for watching and listening. Hopefully you'll come back for the next episode. Until then, thanks for hanging out with us. See you next time.
Thanks so much, Keith.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard Knock Life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share their interests together with a similar kind. When they said Don Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments, and the lectures. Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC.